Hello, everyone.
I'm Carl.
And I'm Em.
Welcome to our podcast discussing all of the latest books. This is our 26th episode and last episode of season 1. And we will be discussing Breaking Dawn by Stephanie Meyer. We'll be saving our ratings to the very end.
We promise to give you all of our honest opinions and all the characters, chapters, and scenarios. We don't mean any harm to any of the authors. This is solely our opinion. And as always, we promise to carl them like we read them.
Period. So, for trigger warnings for this book, again, there's none in the beginning of the book. There should be. There are references to, and hang tight because there's several. There are references to death, torture, violence in general, organized crime and drugs, abandonment, bullying, blood, abortion, eating disorders, and anorexia. There's also references to pregnancy and complications with that. Serious complications, in fact, and then sexual activity and references to rough sex. And as always, spoilers will lie ahead.
If you don't want to hear how this book ends, please pause here, go read the book, and then come back to this episode, which again, have you been living under a rock? So, are you ready to get started?
Let's get into it. Okay, so I'm going to read the little blurb on the back of the book. Again, it's weird, but anyways, here it is. "Don't be afraid," I murmured. "We belong together." I was abruptly overwhelmed by the truth of my own words. This moment was so perfect, so right. There was no way to doubt it. His arms wrapped around me, holding me against him. It felt like every nerve ending in my body was a live wire. "Forever," he agreed. Do you recall that scene in the actual book?
Mm-mm.
Me neither. Okay. I just was there thinking, when was that? All the other ones have been like quotes that were in the book, so that's why I was wondering.
Predominant quotes, too.
Yes.
So part 1 starts off with Bella and Edward preparing for their wedding, and Jacob is still missing after getting Bella and Edward's wedding invitation. The wedding goes off without a hitch until Jacob surprises Bella. After learning her intention to have a honeymoon as a human, he gets escorted out. On their honeymoon, Bella and Edward have sex, which Edward regrets afterwards due to Bella being injured. Bella then tries to get Edward to have sex again, but he puts too many activities in their day to wear her out. Eventually, she realizes her period is late and believes she's pregnant. So the first part I want to talk about is the scene that you didn't remember, which was her driving the tank of a car. And like some guys like pull her over as she's stopped, and they want to take pictures with the car, and they start talking about how she could possibly be like a drug dealer or, you know,
yes, she's getting gas. And they're like literally just talking about her outside the car while she's sitting right there. It's so weird.
And then like Angela's mom is stopped at a stoplight and trying to like look over, and she talks about how she's like fully twisted looking into her car trying to figure out who it is that's driving this vehicle. Which she ends up finding out, like, there's only a few made as well, and they're all made for some high-profile official. So she gets even more mad about the situation, which, of course, knowing Bella, she's already super frustrated for the fact that she gets this new fancy car anyways. But apparently her truck cracked out, which she finds a little bit suspicious that it did so.
Shady.
Yeah, but I find that scene hilarious. It starts off really well with the kind of human side of Bella and kind of relates back to that. But I think that's kind of the last awkward-ish moments we get of Bella for the most part. That isn't transition to vampire or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of like hinting at it in the wedding, but in the wedding it was more of like, I wouldn't even say awkward. It was more of like kind of terrified vibes of Bella until she sees Edward, of course, you know, that the iconic moment. But that definitely was such a weird thing to include in this book. And like it added nothing to the book. And like, I don't know. It was strange. But I can't believe I forgot that part.
To me, it kind of just added like closure to awkward Bella. I don't know how else to describe it, because honestly the writing didn't really talk about most of her like awkwardness like it did so much in the other books. So to me it was kind of like the final closure to awkward Bella. I know
Okay.
that's probably not her intention, but that's how I kind of read the situation.
Okay. I can go with that.
I also want to hint on the fact that Charlie's really upset with Billy and Bella because nobody is really caring that Jacob is missing, which of course they all know the truth. But in Charlie's mind, they're just like, oh, it's no big deal. He'll come back. He's just doing his teenage things. And I guess Charlie is like putting up flyers and all that kind of stuff. So
That's not in the movie, so I didn't remember that part either. And I was like, he put up flyers, even though the dad said it's not a big deal. Like I was like, it's a little extreme, Charlie.
he had his cop instincts happening.
Yeah, I guess.
But we also get where Bella kind of has a flashback of whenever she first told Charlie about Edward proposing to her. And I love that scene. And I really do wish it was in the movie. And I find like that's such like a quirky, which I feel like slowly Charlie started coming out of his shell throughout this, and he becomes predominantly like one of the main side characters outside of the Cullen family. And so I do feel like this was kind of like opening that doorway, but I do wish we kind of got a little bit more of him throughout. If this was how big he was going to be in this book, I mean, I'm not saying huge, but you know, he was a bigger side character. But I do really, really love that he was like, haha, you're going to have to tell your mom. Like, you know, I'm not going to be upset, but she will be.
So I thought that was cute too. And I love that when Mom didn't freak out about it and he was like, traitor, what? Like, yeah. I love that. I thought that was really like, again, because we have so many like vampires or, you know, creatures or whatever in this book that we try to find little ways to like humanize, especially while Bella is human. We try to find ways to like show her humanity as opposed to their lack of. And this is another one of those, like having parents and having to fall, you know what I mean? Like, Edward, I mean, we've got Carlisle and Esme as pseudo parents for them, but it's different. Like they're not really in charge of them. You know what I mean? So I just thought it was a nice little touch to almost kind of like you said, say goodbye to like her humanity, her awkwardness, that phase of Bella, essentially.
Yeah. And I also want to talk about one of your favorite parts of the book, and that's the bachelor trip that Edward gets whisked away with.
I love them. And the movie, honestly, in my head, so reading the book, it didn't look the same in my head as it did in the movie. And I really love the movie scene when they're like jumping on the side of her house and they're like, you better send him out or we're coming in. And she's like, are y'all going to a strip club? And Emmett yells, boring. It's so cute. Like, I just loved it. It was really cute, I thought. Especially because, again, they're vampires. So it's like it's a different experience I'm just glad that it was touched on. Because sometimes I feel like we breeze past that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was really the first time that which I don't know if they were like opening up more because they realized Bella's going to be joining them or what, but I just feel like in this like book, they were not afraid to be who they were around her as much. And so they were kind of in like getting her in on the inside jokes and things like that they had.
Yeah, I totally agree.
But we do, after all of that, get to the wedding day, which there was really sweet moments with Renee and Charlie, Esme, and even Rosalie decided to help out Alice fixing up Bella's hair. So I felt like it was a really good, like, you know, moment to have with all of the members of the family. And also the wedding scene in the book is not what I pictured as in the movie, but like dream wedding scene. Wedding scene.
So iconic. Every time I watch it, I still get goosebumps. Like, I've seen it a million times, and I still get emotional watching the wedding scene in Twilight and Breaking Dawn.
It's just so, like, light and airy. And it almost, like, it feels, like, sunshiny, and yet they can't be in the sunshine. So it was just a nice little moment and everything for that. But Alice did wonderful planning it. I ain't gonna complain with her.
Absolutely. And I think Renee in the book says that Alice and Esme should be wedding planners. Like, y'all should do this for a living. Y'all did really well.
Which I'm sure at some point in time they probably were.
Yeah, all this time that they've been alive, they probably have been one of them. I will say I thought it was really cute though that Charlie had that old like brooch or whatever. I guess
Hmm.
I don't know if it's called a brooch or not, if it goes in your hair, but anyways, he had an old family heirloom that they then replaced with some sapphires as well to be something old and something blue. I just thought that was a cute little touch. Again, like
Agreed.
tying in that like humanity, these human traditions, those sort of things.
Yeah. I really love whenever Alice, she really wanted to see the wedding venue and Alice is like refusing. And she's like, I didn't know that was part of like the old traditions. And she said, well, it is whenever I planned your wedding. So I thought it was really cute. But I feel like that impact of like seeing that scene, as you're walking down the aisle would be really nice to like have, especially if you're fully trusting somebody else and don't really care whether or not you have a wedding.
Exactly. Well, and in the movie, she sees them like organizing and setting up, so she gets a
Mhm.
little preview. So I thought that was a nice touch in the book that she was like, no, 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 I want the full effect when you come downstairs to be in awe. Like, oh, that
Yeah.
was cute.
But at the wedding, Bella also meets the Denali clan, the Alaska clan, coven, however you want to refer to it as, for the first time. And that was at the moment she kind of finally met, what was that one lady's name that she was jealous of? Tanya? Is that the one she was jealous of?
Yes, Tanya is the one in the book that had made a move on Edward and been rejected. And she
Yeah.
like rubs up on his arm when she comes to the wedding. Back up, first of all. Like, excuse you. And then of course Irina is the one that's, causing a scene because of the werewolves.
Yeah.
I would have told her to shove it. Get out of here.
I did find it really cute though that Edward was kind of like defensive of her too, like, sly away from your touch. This is my wife, Bella, kind of
Yes.
moment. So he responded to it very well.
He did. Absolutely. He handled it totally appropriately.
Well, and then he gets the surprise for Bella that Jacob has returned to be the best man, which also really cute moments with Seth. Like, I love Seth. Love how like accepting he is. Like, Seth is probably one of my favorite side characters besides
Agree.
Emmett. I think Emmett's one of my other ones, but
Wholeheartedly agree. And I think the book did a really good job. Obviously, in movies, it's, only so much can go in. It was hinted at in the movie that Seth had sort of a friendship, but it wasn't really detailed. So getting
yeah.
in the book even where like him and Edward have a sort of like brotherly friendship relationship or whatever was really nice, I thought. And
I
it
do
kind of
wish they touched
explained
on
what
that
happens.
more.
I do too. And it kind of helped explain more what happens later too, so that we
Mhm.
understand why Seth would leave. I really liked that. I like that a lot. I do. I love Seth. I love Seth. It's weird watching it now because I'm pretty sure like I'm older than he was filming that. But when I was younger, I liked Seth.
Was that one played by Bobo?
Boo Boo.
Boo Boo? Bobo?
Boo Boo Stewart is his real
Yes.
name.
I thought his name was Bobo this entire time.
It's Booboo.
Okay. But I really do love that relationship. And I think it plays a lot on like that young innocence within the pack as well, of like being a little bit more accepting because they've not grown up as, because the older ones that have had several years listening to the legends and the
Yep.
kind of getting the negative aspect of the elders, where the younger ones have only been able to get a few, maybe years, if that, of stories. So
Yes, totally agree. And I didn't remember Paul imprinting on Jacob's sister Rachel.
I don't think that happened in the movie.
Well, there's this one scene where they're at the beach and Sam and Emily and Paul and some girl and Embry and his girl are like all cuddled up over there on the blanket. So like it hints at it briefly, I think, but you don't know that's Jacob's sister. And honestly, in the movie, I don't even know if we know that Jacob has sisters.
I agree. I didn't remember that fact rereading
So
it.
so it's like what? Wait, and then like it also changed that dynamic of Paul. So then for him to like, because they said when you imprint, obviously your world shifts, but also like that it also helps sort of kind of tame them a little bit. Like
Hmm.
it like balances them out now they've done that or whatever. And Paul is still such a hothead. And so I kind of
Yeah.
would have liked that to be explained a little bit more. That threw me for a loop. I didn't remember that.
Yeah, I agree. But while they're at the wedding, Bella is dancing with Jacob and they're kind of just having small talk. And Jacob kind of makes a teasing comment, but then Bella kind of snaps back and says, I will have a true honeymoon. Like, I have no problem with that. And Jacob flips out on her. What do you
Absolutely.
mean you're having a real honeymoon? And
Here's
he
my
starts.
thing. She could have meant they were having a real honeymoon without the sex. It could be a
True.
real honeymoon, going on a trip, enjoying a vacation without having sex. So like
But
how
my
it escalated
question,
so quickly, and then he was like grabbing her and hurting her, and I was like, bro, if he breaks her, you just said it doesn't matter. I'm confused.
well, that's my question is like, if he was okay with her being turned during her honeymoon, why is it any big deal she's actually having a honeymoon before turning?
And he's never had sex with a vampire. He doesn't know what they're capable of and what they're not capable of.
True. I don't think it even really came down to the fact that he was a vampire at that point. It was the fact that, like, it was like sealing the deal in his head that she was for sure going to be with Edward.
Probably. I know part of it, though, was like the concern that he would essentially break her.
Yeah.
But, and maybe she wants to be broken. Mind your business, Jacob. I don't know. It was very dramatic. That's all. That's what I took away from it. It was very dramatic.
Well, and he ends up getting escorted out because he starts like vibrating like he's fixing a shift, which I think kind of ruined the mood a little bit. But Bella's just like, I'm just going to forget about it. Let's go back to the party. And when they do, Alice surprises them with the fact that they're leaving, but she has packed all of Bella's belongings up. So Bella has no earthly clue where they're going for their honeymoon, which I don't know if I would like that. I mean,
I think I would, but it would have to be somebody that I knew me and would pick a good honeymoon, not just some random person. But like again, I'm heavy on the like to be loved is to be known sort of thing. So like if I was committing to somebody, I would think they would know what I want to do for our honeymoon.
Yeah.
Like what if you got there and it was awful? Like you went to like some golf resort and now you're stuck on a golf resort and you're like, this is not my honeymoon. I would be so mad.
True.
But what Edward did was good. Like where they went, I thought was a great idea.
Perfect. Yeah, definitely perfect for Bella.
Yeah.
So they did end up arriving, which in the movie they do hang out a little bit in Rio, but pretty much in the book they go straight to Al Esme, which they find out is a gift that Carlisle had given to Esme, and they have this nice, beautiful home on this island.
Giving her a whole private island. We love Carlisle. I will say, I would have liked, if it was my honeymoon, I would have liked like at least a day or two in Rio, either before or after. But like, you're passing through, you have to stop and do something,
Well, possibly after the fact they could have stopped if everything didn't have happened that happened. But I mean, in the movie they do stop. I think it seemed just like for the evening or something like that, and we're in the Rio area. I think they even emphasized it was during Carnival.
I think so. I remember there being like a big parade, big party.
Yeah.
But
I don't know if that's just I don't know if that's just a regular day or not. But Bella and Edward gets on the island, and Bella gets like really nervous about her first time. So she goes to the bathroom and spends a long time shaving, taking a shower, like all of this stuff to get ready for it. And then ends up walking out into the ocean where Edward's waiting.
I just want to add, it's a little funny to me to insinuate that like Alice wouldn't have had her waxed and plucked and everything in preparation for her wedding day.
Yeah, for sure.
You would have shaved already, babe, but whatever. Go ahead. It was funny. It was a funny little scene, like the awkwardness again, her human side. But I just thought that, I was like, that's kind of a plot hole. Because you absolutely would have been plucked and waxed and everything under the moon for your wedding day, I think.
Yep.
But anyways.
Well, I find it really funny of all that too, but then it's just like a fade to black scene, and then it wakes up the next morning to Bella super excited, super happy.
Give us the details. I'm too old to be reading a fade to black scene, okay? No, listen, I will say though, when I watched this movie the first time, and she goes out to the ocean and she takes her thing off and she's naked, I wholeheartable believed that they were actually naked in that water. And I was so scandalized. And then it was maybe like a couple years later, probably when I got older, and I realized that in those scenes, like she had on like a nude bra and nude panties, so she wasn't actually butt naked. Yeah. And then I was like, well, That's lame. Like, what? Like, I don't know. Just the random thought process about them actually in the movie and in the water. It's so strange what you like hyperfix on or something, but
Well, and Edward's not very happy about how the night went, which Bella is, and she's really upset with Edward because he's not happy about it. But I do hate the way that he kind of responds to it.
yeah,
Because I mean, obviously Bella wanted it to be a good experience. Bella thought it was a good experience, and
she
Edward
had a
kind of
good time.
yeah. So and then Edward just kind of ruins it for her, which I mean, I think he realized it, but at the same time he was just like so mad at himself. He just like didn't process it, I guess.
I will say, watching it back now as an adult, as a young girl, I was the amount of bruises that were left and stuff. I was kind of like, whoa, whatever.
Yeah.
But like knowing what I know now, I feel like it's a little different. I mean, I'm not saying that he didn't leave a lot of bruises. He did. He's a vampire, whatever. But like a little bruise here or there is actually like not that crazy. And it wasn't like she had like broken bones or like a
Yeah.
sprained wrist or I don't know. But I thought it was funnier because the damage to the bed. That's what I always thought was
Yeah.
funny. When I watched it, even to this day, the feathers flying in the air and only one beam of the canopy still being up on the bed. I think that's
Yeah.
hilarious. But he's focused on a little bit of bruises. And what we see in the movie is like a bruise on her shoulder.
Yeah,
Which,
the
first of
movie
all,
was
it's a
very
weird
small amount of
place.
bruising. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not. I don't know. I'm not
The
gonna
the
get into
book seems like it's like
it,
she's covered head to toe in like dark
and like
bruises.
everywhere, like all over
Yeah.
her arms, all over her legs, all over her torso, like everything is bruised,
Yeah.
which would be different, I guess. But also, I don't know. I guess I would have liked the movie to be a little bit clearer. Like, for example, and I'm not going to get into details, but like if she had it like on her shoulder, if it was like a handprint, like where he was holding on to her while they were doing something, or even like a thumb, you know what I mean? Like something that would make more sense
Mhm.
as to what was happening. The movie doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, I agree.
Not like he was just punching her. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Though, like that's how it's described, and that's not what he was doing. There would
The book
be, it would,
definitely seems like it was like a whole scene of violence for sure.
yeah, like he was just throwing her around, hitting the wall, and like, like insane. Nothing. It needed to make more sense, I think, in correlation with what they were actually doing. If that makes sense.
Agreed.
I'm not saying they had to
Agreed.
go into details about the sex scenes because it is a YA, but it at least could make sense with sex, not just throwing her down the flight of stairs, for example. You know,
Yeah.
it's kind of giving those vibes.
Well, and then he just basically tries to wear her out for weeks so that way she doesn't have the energy to even try, which it works. And then the housekeeper randomly shows up and, is cleaning, and she has these like beliefs that Edward is really what he is. And he's like holding Bella there hostage or something, which
That was hilarious.
why would
Also,
you take this chick to a random island in the middle of nowhere that his parents have bought for each other?
why would I call in a housekeeper to come clean if my intentions were to
Yes.
murder this girl? But also, I thought it was funny that they waited for the housekeepers to get there to clean up the bed. Why didn't they just clean up the bed?
Yeah, especially Edward. It would have taken him 5 seconds.
Literally 5 seconds. So I thought that was a little strange, but I obviously it played into the need to have a housekeeper and then for her to say those things that she said, but it was weird.
Yeah.
I'll give her that.
True.
She wasn't scared to call it out.
Mm-mm. But whenever they get done and they leave, Bella and Edward eventually end up trying again. And it does go better the second time around. So they end up on the island for a little bit longer. And one day, Bella is getting into her suitcase and realizes that she had some tampons in there. And she realizes that she's late on her period. So she starts feeling like a kick, which the first time I read that, I was like, whoa, way too early. Like, what are we doing? But turns out Bella believes she's pregnant and she is like frozen in shock. So Alice ends up getting a vision that basically Edward's whole world has come crashing down. And she calls and Bella requests to speak to Carlisle. And whenever she gets on the phone, she kind of describes what's going on. And at some point, Edward just kind of snaps out of it and takes the phone from her. And he talks to Carlisle and basically makes a plan to get the baby out of Bella. And so he starts basically telling Bella, like, don't worry about it. We'll get it out of you. Don't worry. And Bella starts panicking because she wants to protect her baby at all costs. So she does something that in hindsight makes sense, but up front was just kind of like, why in the world would you pick up the phone and call Rosalie? But she does decide to call Rosalie to protect her, I guess, from them taking the baby out.
Which is interesting. It is done very differently in the book, I think, than it is in the movie. The actual, like, Rose protecting her or whatever. In the book, Rosalie is, like, manipulating her into doing what is best for the baby, even if it'll kill Bella, which I think Bella would go along with it anyways, but I just don't like the way Rosalie goes about it in the book. You can clearly tell in the book that Rose does not care about Bella. But, like,
Agreed.
she would happily take that baby and let Bella die.
Well, and Jacob emphasizes that in his section as well. Like, she's just basically a guard dog that's there for the baby.
Yeah, and Edward sort of, like, acknowledges it and kind of, he doesn't overly agree because everyone's listening because he's just listening to Jacob's thoughts, but his, like, I think it says, like, his mouth went to a tight line or something, like, to show his agreement. But I didn't like that. I didn't like that at all. I actually like Rosalie in the movies. I do not like her in this book.
Nope.
I was like, I would have drop kick her.
Well, she seems absolutely not concerned with Bella, especially later on, which we'll get into a little bit more, but she just absolutely did not have any concern for Bella whatsoever. It was all about the baby and the soon as she could get the baby in her arms, basically.
Yeah, well, and I will say I did, and we will get into more detail, but I like that the book explains who is on what side of this debate, and because in the movie, once you know that, in the movie you can kind of see it. But without knowing it in the movie, it's not, except for Rose and Edward, because they make their opinions known in the movie. Other than them, you can't really tell what everybody else thinks in the movie. So I did like to know that, at least, to have that background.
Absolutely. So Jacob has come home and finds out that Bella has returned from her honeymoon, but is hearing that she's sick. He believes that she was changed, and so he goes to find out if that's true or not. Jacob ends up finding out about the pregnancy and is angry with Edward, but he didn't know that Edward is also angry. So Jacob ends up telling the pack about Bella through his mind sharing, and they end up deciding that she's a danger to their people, and so they want to kill her and the baby. Jacob ends up breaking off on his own pack to try to protect Bella, and while there, Bella ends up having her spine shattered by the baby, and Edward's forced to turn her.
That's really morbid.
Yes. So I love the opening line of Jacob's section. Can't speak today. But his quote, I mean, back whenever this was the thing, like big thing, there was a lot of like advertisement for it and stuff like that with a quote, but he says life sucks and then you die. And I think that's a good sums up for especially his section of the book, that, you know, that's basically a good summary of his feelings and really what kind of Bella goes through. She just basically has life sucking her and then dying. So
I will say also, I thought that it was really cool. His little quote for his section starts, it's A Midsummer Night's Dream, Act 3, Scene 1, by William Shakespeare. And it's, and yet to say the truth, reason and love keep a little company together nowadays. I liked that. I thought that was a really good setup and segue into what we're about to get into with Jacob's point of view.
Agreed. So we start off with the fact that Paul has imprinted on Jacob's sister, Rachel, which we were kind of talking how we didn't remember that Jacob had sisters. And especially in the movie, it was never played that Paul imprinted his sister, which I'm not quite sure what significance it brought to the story with that either, especially considering Rachel was not a big thing and Paul even wasn't really a big thing in the series. So I'm not really sure what it brought to the table.
I would agree. Yeah. I think the only thing it brought to the table is that other people were imprinting and Jacob was mad about it.
True.
Like, that's it. And I don't think that's really relevant either, to be quite frank. But I thought it was so weird that all of a sudden his sister comes home and Paul imprints. The whole imprinting thing is weird to me, and I kind of wish it had been done differently, but that's just my opinion.
Well, and so Jacob gets annoyed with Paul and goes to visit Quill, I'm sorry, which I know you have strong emotions about that one as well. But during his conversations with Quill, they end up hearing Sam calling a meeting. And when they go, they end up discovering that Sam had overheard a conversation where Charlie had stated that Bella is back from her honeymoon, but she's extremely sick, which they all are believing is code for the fact that Bella has been changed. So Jacob basically decides to go verify this information, which I feel like it's kind of walking into the lion's den, to be honest, if that was the case.
Absolutely.
And so whenever he shows up, the Cullens kind of greet him, and he can really tell that something's wrong, which when he walks in, Bella is actually looking very sick, and he realizes she's very, very pregnant as well.
I have a question about this. How come he didn't, like, smell like she was sick and, like, smell the baby?
I just passed it off as the fact that he was so angry. He just kind of, and also I feel like they talk about how like potent the Cullen scent is to him. So I'm kind of just thinking that it was maybe overrun by all that. But I also think he was just so angry, he would have ignored any kind of smell or weirdness that he could have sensed in general, just to verify that Bella was still human or not.
Okay. That makes sense.
So Jacob starts thinking, and Edward, of course, starts reading his thoughts.
Which is a bad idea. No offense to Jacob, but he needs to get it together.
And so Edward asks Jacob to step outside, and Edward kind of explains the situation of what all has happened to that point. And he talks to Jacob and asks Jacob to help him convince Bella to take the baby out. And he even asked Jacob to ask Bella to make the agreement to get pregnant again, but using Jacob's sperm. Super weird. Weirdest thing Edward could have probably offered. I get why he did, though. It was just more like, tell her to stop risking her life. Like, if she doesn't want some stranger's baby, maybe. But even then, how is that going to work with like Bella raising werewolf offspring? Because obviously it's going to turn at some point, because they're around the vampires that trigger the gene. So
the real question is how is it going to work? Because it's not just a baby in general. The fact that Edward ever thought that it was just a baby in general, when she didn't even want kids a week ago, it's been a little longer than that, 3 weeks ago, however long it was when she first found out. Are you stupid? Also, she's in love with Edward. She's carrying Edward's baby. She's not going to kill Edward's baby.
Yeah.
Like, that makes no sense. So I think, like, for me, I had to read that with the understanding that Edward was unraveling. Like, he was going crazy and he was trying to think of anything possible. Because when I very first read it, I was like, this is the stupidest thing that I've ever heard in my entire life.
Yeah.
It makes no sense. So then I tried to backtrack it and read it from he's literally grasping at any straw possible to get this, to save Bella. And it made it a little bit better. It was still really dumb. But Jacob was kind of going for it at one point too, and I was like, what are we doing? If she wanted your baby, she'd be with you. But it's just a baby in general. Men are dumb. Honestly, that's what I took from this entire scene.
I agree that that's probably a good summary for it.
It's just so weird. And he, like, Jacob, it says it first, like, you want me to be a stud? And Edward's like, pretty much. And Jacob's like, I'll think about it. What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Bella gets kind of mad whenever he finally presents that to her as well. Like, did Edward ask you to do that? What the crap? And then I think Bella realizes, like, oh my god, like, Edward's really losing everything over the situation. Yeah.
He's losing his mind.
But Edward also asked Jacob to kill him whenever Bella's heart stops beating as well, which it's technically did. So, I mean, I think they knew in the literal sense of like if she actually died and he couldn't bring her back, like kill her or kill him. But I think that reading it, especially reading it back, it wasn't justified because if you're going to try to save her as a vampire, like that doesn't make any sense. But okay.
I will say though, in that scene when he does tell Edward, this is fast forwarding, but when he tells him that he won't kill him, I was like, you should have saw that coming.
Mm-hmm.
Come on now.
Yeah. Well, and Jacob also notices that Rosalie, again, is just really close to Bella, but it's not out of protection of Bella. It's out of protecting the baby. And I think Bella made almost like a sacrifice of knowing, like, if I die, at least somebody's going to care about just the baby. And so she was accepting of the fact that Rose wasn't there for her and just there for the baby, just to have somebody there to protect the baby after she passes. Because I don't think Bella had any intention of actually making it out of it alive and just had a little bit of hope that Edward would be able to save her. But I don't think she thought she was going to make it out alive at all.
I definitely agree that I think she was satisfied with letting Rosalie do the role that she did, in the off chance that she did die and Edward had nothing to do with the baby.
Mm-hmm.
I think that meant, you know, somebody would love the baby and care for the baby in the worst case scenario kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I can understand that. I mean, planning for every possible outcome. I get that.
Yeah.
But I didn't like Rosalie. I didn't like the way she did things in this book.
Well, and Jacob gets kind of triggered by the whole situation as well. And so he transitions and runs off to the pack. And of course, they have the pack mind sharing. And he replays everything that's happened. And so he goes back to the pack and they decide that they're going to kill Bella to protect their people. And Jacob stands up as the true alpha and tells Sam that he is not going to kill Bella. And he decides to break off into his own pack. The scene in the movie, I feel like, is a little bit more dramatic with it, but definitely in the book, it seemed like he just was like really hunched down, and all of a sudden he's like, "No, I'm big bad," and then runs away. So
it's very weird. I don't know. I don't like it. The way that they're so quick to switch to being in agreement to kill Bella. I can understand monitoring the situation, and as soon as that baby is out of Bella, deciding whether or not the baby's a harm. I can understand that. I don't think you should just automatically jump and assume it's going to be harmful, but agreeing to kill Bella before the baby is born, which, first of all, the way the baby's progressing, it actually doesn't make a whole lot of sense. They could probably kill Bella and that baby probably would still survive. So, like, they'd have to kill the baby in Bella too. Which is even more gruesome and graphic and what the heck. So I was actually really disappointed with that because it felt like a total, like, it didn't feel like those characters. They just said that Bella's made her decision. Literally not even like 25 pages ago. They said Bella's made her decision. It's not our business. And then, because we've never heard of it, now we're going to jump to the worst case scenario and we're going to go ahead and kill a human. Even though she didn't intentionally, she didn't even know she could get pregnant. Like, I don't know. It just felt like one extreme to the other. Yeah. And I wish it would have been, if they had an intelligent, that's not the right word, intelligent conversation about this issue and then came to that result, I might have been able to believe a little bit more. But, I mean, it was bad.
Yeah, I agree.
And they have no idea about anything. They just went straight to murder.
To me, it also would have made sense if they had, which, I mean, I don't know for sure that wasn't the case, but if they had expressed stories previously about the turning of the children and stuff, and they had that in their minds, that would have made complete sense for that reaction. But they didn't emphasize that was the case at all. So it didn't make sense why they jumped to that conclusion so quickly.
I kind of wish it had hinted that. I kind of wish it would have hinted that the werewolves had encountered immortal children before, or something, like, to go along with the exact way the vampires were thinking that the child was. Something to sort of, A, tie it all together, but also to make it make sense. But she didn't do that. So here we are.
Agreed. I did really appreciate, though, whenever Seth runs off after Jacob and decides to join his pack, and he, expresses his reasoning being the fact that he doesn't feel like the Cullens are any danger to the people, and he especially likes Bella and Edward, and he doesn't want to be on the wrong side of things. And then Leah ends up joining them, which, of course, she's just there to protect her brother. Which, to be honest, I don't really know what Leah really brought to the table other than just adding another barrier they were having to cross over of, frustration and stuff.
I will say, if I was Leah, I would have wanted to leave Sam's pack too and not have to listen to him. I get that. I understand that. And protecting your brother, I get that too. However, shut up.
Yeah.
Honestly, there's a scene in the book too, we don't get it in the movie, where she goes in the house and snaps on Bella while she's literally about to die. I would have ripped her head off if I was anybody in that house at that time. I mean, no second thought, would have ripped her head off. Agreed. Which is very dramatic. But you're going to come in here and yell at my near-death pregnant wife? Oh, no. You got to go.
Mm-hmm.
We ain't doing that. I don't know. And it was just I'll tell you what actually really made me really mad before we even got to that scene in the book. When Esme tries to bring her clothes and food, and she's god-awful to Esme, of all people. And I was like, fine, you can stay in your little wolf form and you can eat the little deer, you little brat. I was mad. I was like, starve then. See if we care. It's just rude.
Of course, Esme was extremely nice to them about everything. And
so nice.
She's making them food and, trying to get them clothes and offering them showers and rooms to sleep in. I mean, they were extremely kind into trying to get them to stay. But of course, they've decided that because Leah is sleeping outside, they're all going to sleep outside, which would be miserable.
Seth didn't. Seth was like, nah, I'm going to sleep in this bed.
Well, I find it really funny that I thought that I really feel like if the situation hadn't happened with Bella and Bella was okay and Edward had some sense to him, I really feel like they would have built him a doghouse outside as a joke almost. So I'm kind of upset that didn't happen because I would have laughed my head off. But Rosalie does have that moment where she etches into the bowl, mud
Fido?
or something. Yeah, Fido, yeah.
It was hilarious.
Jacob has the idea of Bella basically drinking blood to feed the baby, which honestly, a house full of well-educated vampires, keyword, and well-educated, several of them with multiple masters, doctorates, etc., not thinking that the baby that is half vampire may want some blood does not make any sense to me.
Here's what didn't even make more sense to me. I don't even think they thought the baby was half at that point. I think they thought the baby was full. So if it's a full-blooded, well, not blooded, it's a full vampire, it's going to want blood.
Yeah. True.
And if it's draining Bella at the rate that it's draining her, I'm almost curious if it was drinking a little bit from Bella every day.
Yeah.
Because the way she deteriorated so fast and her organs were trying to shut down and stuff like that sounded to me like maybe there was a little bit of pulling from the, not obviously didn't drain her all in one go, but a little here and there or something, just to.
Agreed.
Because it said the baby was, which I struggle with this. Movie, the book, doesn't matter. I struggle with comprehending at what exact rate that baby was really growing.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, because at one point Edward can hear the baby's thoughts in the womb. And so I guess I would have preferred it to say, this is how a normal pregnancy goes. This is the stage that babies start having brain activity, or they to have a concept there. Cause I don't know that. I'm not a OBGYN. I'm not a doctor. And I just kept thinking, I have 3, 5, and 8-month-old niece, and not a single one of them probably has the cognates to do most of what this baby did in 2 days out of the womb. So I was just I needed to make more sense. It just was very far-fetched.
Agreed. And The other thing is too is, I mean, as the baby's growing, I mean, it starts breaking the bones, and especially whenever Edward starts hearing it, it's like it's trying not to move very much to help hurt Bella any
Yeah,
and stuff like that. It's just very weird, especially seeing like in the movie, it's a full on baby that comes out, and to hear that Edward, like I'm thinking it's like a 2 or like six
a
year old,
toddler. Yeah,
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 where it
I
has
agree.
comprehension that it's hurting mom or something like that, but
It was like, it loves your voice. It loves my voice. It loves you. I was like,
uh-huh.
what?
Well,
I
and
don't know.
Jacob
I just wanted
realizes that he's kind of lost the war, I guess, at that point too, because he
Edward is
realizes,
hooked.
like, yeah, Edward's finally like gone over to the dark side, I guess you can say.
Yeah.
But they also start talking about babies' names, and they talk about how they were gonna call the baby, which she believed was a boy, which to be honest, she's had dreams. It's pretty much come true to this point.
Yep.
So to have a dream about a boy and it come out a girl was confusing to me because a lot of her dreams reflected exactly what happened.
Exactly. And she also had multiple dreams that it was a little boy.
Yeah.
And what was crazy to me is that it didn't come out
And
to
I
be a
didn't it
boy.
say blue eyes too? I think the dreams that emphasized the boy had blue eyes.
I remember, I don't remember what color eyes it had in the dream. What color eyes does Edward have? Because Bella's are brown.
Well, I mean, gold technically.
Well, I guess what he originally had when he was human.
I don't
I don't
remember if it
remember.
ever talked about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I don't know. Either way, though, I will say it was weird that she saw a boy and it wasn't a boy. That also is not how it happened in the movie.
Yeah.
And that's probably why they changed it. In the movie, she doesn't have dreams about an immortal child. She doesn't learn about immortal children until almost when she gives birth.
Yeah.
In the book, she learns about that and dreams about immortal children the night before her wedding.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting how different that is in the book and the movie. But I totally agree that why why was she having multiple dreams of a little baby boy look like Edward and her, and then it ends up being a girl?
Yeah.
It makes sense that it's a girl because Jacob has to imprint, right, to connect the full storyline. So her dream should have just been a little girl.
True.
But I don't know. I agree.
The other
Plot hole.
thing I have a question of is we don't really get Bella's perspective in her pregnancy. So I'm really curious in her dreams whether or not Nessie or Renesmee was giving
Oh,
her dreams of, things while she was pregnant.
yes. Well, and I don't really understand that partially because though it says like the baby had to experience it in order to be able to share it with you essentially. So like
Hmm.
what she's seen she can share. In the womb she ain't seen nothing but the womb.
Yeah. I guess I
But
was thinking more
also,
so like the thought of like she was taking in Bella's memories, I guess, was kind of the thought I was operating on.
well, and I wouldn't be surprised if she could because I feel like we kind of get a sense of she might have a little bit more a more expanding gift too because Edward reads thoughts. So like
Hmm.
I don't know if she combined them, but whatever. I don't know. But we talked about this in Twilight, I think it was, and I told you I wanted to come back to it for Breaking Dawn. I don't think it's in our episode, but it still honestly doesn't make sense to me how Edward could procreate.
Hmm. Yep.
He's dead, first of all. He has no blood circulating, so how he maintained an erection to even have sex, I don't understand. And then we also talked about he's cold, and sperm has to stay at a certain temperature to stay alive. So it's like I kind of wish, and I'm not saying I would have wanted Carlisle to go in super details about sex ed, but can we explain it somehow so that it actually makes sense logically rather than we're just in this? Because here's my thing: this isn't really fantasy. It has creatures, has vampires and werewolves, but it's not really fantasy. I would say if we were in a fantasy world and magic existed, it might be a little different. But we're not in that world. We're in a modern day world with just creatures. So I would have liked that to be explained better because it logistically doesn't make any sense how she even got pregnant in the first place.
Yeah.
And then the entire pregnancy doesn't really make a whole lot of sense either.
Agreed.
I'm too, like, I'm a logical thinker. I need you to make it make sense. Do your research. Make it make sense. Or be like, hey, at the beginning, this is fiction. It's not real. I know it doesn't make sense. I don't care. I'm writing it anyways. Like, some sort of like disclaimer that I'm not a doctor, so I didn't do any research into that. So just ignore that confusion. I don't know. Something. But
the only thing I can think of is she did like emphasize at one point where I don't remember if it was Edward or if it was Bella or somebody was telling Jacob how that, Carlisle's kind of stumped and he's like, and I know like Carlisle's like doing his research of like, measuring Bella and doing scans and things like that to figure out what's going on with her. So it kind of emphasized that it doesn't make any sense, but at the same time, it doesn't like blatantly out like kind of say that.
It says it doesn't make sense why the baby's growing so fast or exactly what the baby is. But I don't think it says it doesn't make sense as to why he could procreate in the first place. Because then it says, at the end, we find out there's a man who's out here running game on all these kind of women and just procreating left and right.
True.
So it's not an anomaly. It's possible. So I don't know. I guess I would have just liked a little bit more
clarification.
Science. Yeah. Even if it was, well, really, you shouldn't even be able to maintain an erection. Like, even if it was Carlisle acknowledging that, but they don't. Carlisle actually tells him, like, because he says he talked to Carlisle about them doing this, and Carlisle says to him, it'll be really good. You're going to really enjoy yourself. You got to control yourself or whatever. So, even that part of it is, I don't know. I guess when you write it YA, I guess you're assuming that children, because that's who you're writing for, that's not who you're writing for. Anybody of any age can read YA, but when you write YA, you have to keep it in a certain category. And so I guess maybe that was the point. She couldn't go into too many details.
Yeah.
But also, we're also talking about killing a baby. And, we're talking about heavy topics in this book. So why can't we talk about that also? I don't know.
Yeah.
It just was weird. And I just would have preferred it to be explained or at least acknowledge that it's BS and let's move on from it, or something. I don't know.
True.
But that guy that's just thumping them out is insane. That is not what it says, I don't think, in the movie. In the movie, I just think it says this one child. But in the book, it's like, I got sisters left and right, dude. So, that's weird. Sorry, I just ranted.
Well, side note to that, I do think he says that he does have sisters, but I think they were human and he changed them by biting them too in the movie.
Gotcha. I knew his aunt, the one that's with him is his aunt. I knew he changed her.
Yeah.
Which, does it go into detail in the book, when the baby's born, she like bites Jacob so they know she's not venomous. In the movie, do you remember that I don't think it talks about any of that, about whether or not they're venomous or... he references that he changed his aunt, but other than that, does it talk about whether or not they are or not venomous? I don't remember her biting him or anything.
I don't believe so.
Okay. I just wondered. I watched the movies and I don't remember doing it, but that was interesting in this book too. I forgot all about that.
So,
but it makes sense.
True.
The little baby would be biting on it. It's a vampire. Like,
yeah.
So at least that made sense.
Well, and as Jacob's kind of listening and we get the two names, so she's decided if it's a boy, she's going to call it EJ, short for Edward Jr., which...
No, Edward Jacob.
Was it? I thought it was Edward Jr.
No, it's Edward Jacob.
Oh.
It's even worse. Edward Jr. would make sense. It's Edward and Jacob.
Really? It doesn't actually ever say what the J stands for.
Oh, in the movie it does.
She says, I love you so much, little EJ. Of course you're happy. And Edward says, what did you call him again? And she said, I sort of named him. I didn't think you would want, well, you know. And he says, EJ. And she says, your father's name was Edward too. And he said, yes, it was. What? What? He likes my voice too. And then they start talking about that if it's a girl, why they would call it Renesmee.
Oh, maybe it is supposed to be Edward Jr. in the book then. In the movie, it's Edward Jacob.
I just assumed, I guess, it was Junior because she says your father's name was Edward too. So I just thought it kind of was emphasizing that it was also going to be in the line, which technically it would be Edward the Third if
it wouldn't be Junior.
Yeah.
I mean, you could say Junior, which really you can't. So it's only a Junior if the full name matches, not just the first name.
True.
But
which I guess Edwards doesn't because he changed it.
I'm gonna say, isn't it like Edward Anthony Mason or something?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Either way, Edward Jr. or Edward Jacob, they're both stupid. And Renesmee is stupid. And I'm sorry to say that. I get the idea of combining your mother's names. Lovely thought. They just don't work.
True.
It's ugly. It's a mouthful.
My question is, what does she expect to nickname her? Because technically it is Renee and Esme together. So are they going to call her Renee or Esme? Or are they going to make up their own, which is the centerpiece, which is Nessie?
Nessie. I will say, I didn't think it would be Nessie. I would have assumed like Ness.
Yeah.
That's what I would have thought. But still, Loch Ness Monster, I mean, it's still the same effect.
Yeah. Well, and Jacob gets really upset with the entire scene of kind of Edward changing sides. And so he gets mad and decides to leave, which Edward basically throws car keys at him, and he drives off somewhere and meets some girl, which is a weird scene as well. But he basically describes how all he sees is Bella, pieces of Bella, and he just wants to get back to Bella, which I hate that for him because, like, at this point, it's really obvious, like, he isn't ever going to get her, which obviously we know how that ends up playing out. But in the moment reading it, I would feel really bad for him and that he can't get her.
Agreed. But also, this was like a weird plot hole too. It talks about how much they wanted to be around each other because of the baby.
Mm-hmm.
But also in the past, none of that happened with any other relatives of imprinting individuals. Like, that didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
And if that baby doesn't know Jacob. The baby doesn't have a pull towards Jacob. Jacob has a pull towards that baby once he sees the baby. But it makes no sense for while she's in the womb. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, that leads me to my next question, because I was hoping you were going to say something along that lines. You
can always count on me to complain.
So if that's the case and he felt the pull to Bella because of her daughter, did Paul feel the pull to Jacob because of Rachel?
Did Quill feel pulled to Emily because of her niece?
Uh-huh.
Like, literally, there's so many lines.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense.
Yep.
Quite frankly, we know Paul didn't feel a pull towards Jacob because he hated him for quite some time.
Yep.
So, like, it just doesn't make sense. And would it have been Billy? Did Paul feel a pull towards Billy for Rachel?
Yep.
Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And if they said the pull only existed while she was pregnant, I could get more on board.
Yes.
But they then connected it to all this time that Jacob's also been in love with her. And that didn't make any sense. That had nothing to do with imprinting. That was the simple fact that you were in love with Bella. And now you're going to be in love with her baby.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yep.
It's very weird. I don't like the imprinting on the kids. I really don't like that. It really bothers me.
So Jacob is back at the house, and during his visit, Bella's spine ends up breaking, and they decide that it's time to get the baby out.
First scenes in the movie, when her back cracks and then her knees crack, it is awful.
Well, and then as Edward is like preparing to change her, I really appreciate that his thought was, I have to ask Jacob whether or not I can break the treaty for her. And I really appreciate, like, it was a really good scene of like, do whatever it takes. Like you've got to save her kind of situation from Jacob. But Edward just taking that moment to kind of get that respect, because he also doesn't want to still put his family at risk after the fact anyways. And it also gives kind of the pack no reason to come after the family after the fact other than for the baby. So Edward ends up ripping Bella open to get the baby out, which Rosalie kind of snaps in that moment, which question is, how was she not fine in the moment, but then fine 5 seconds later to take the baby? Confusing there.
We'll say, when Bella does later on describe that the baby doesn't quite smell like a straight human, it's more of a mixture, and she's able to control.
We're not talking about the room still being filled with blood everywhere.
I was gonna say, if they had taken the baby to Rose, I think it would be different. Her coming into the room with Bella literally bloody and bleeding out doesn't make sense. I agree.
Yeah. Well, and then Edward gives her his venom, which still weird moment where he takes the needle and like injects it straight into her heart to be able to inject his venom. But she does have a moment kind of clarity where she realizes it's Renesmee and not EJ. And then Jacob actually has a moment where he believes that Bella is actually dead. So he goes down to actually kill the baby, and Rosalie is holding her. And as soon as she turns with the baby or they make eye contact, the imprint bond forms, and Jacob just like collapses to his knees. And all of a sudden he realizes why he was made in the world.
It's disgusting. Also, I have a thought. The technology, I can't even talk. The technology that was used to like age the child in the movie, god awful.
Yes.
God awful.
Yes.
I hate it. It's every time I watch it, I cringe.
Mm-hmm.
Once she's finally, I think it's Mackenzie Fox that plays that, is the little girl that plays her. Once she's to that age and it's a real person, it's so much better.
Yeah.
I would have rather them literally casted. No.
The behind the scenes make it even worse.
Oh, no.
I remember watching it on the DVD.
Oh, no. I would have literally rather them casted, like, let's say, like 4 different stages and just spaced it out, or said that this baby that might look a little older or younger played it for a little longer or whatever. Like, I would have rather that happen than this. I don't even want to call it CGI, because it really wasn't CGI. We've seen CGI in plenty of other movies, and this was awful.
No, it was an animatronic baby, and then they had added CGI to the face, basically.
It's the way they're like holding the baby like this, and they're like, it's so weird.
Yeah.
I hate it. But that scene where he walks and the baby's like right here, and he makes eye contact and he hits his knees, I could vomit. I will say, later on when she wakes up and realizes all this stuff, we're going to talk about more of that too, but when Jacob makes the comment, if I was having those thoughts, like Edward wouldn't let me live or whatever, and then Edward's like, still debating. That's so cute, and I like that we throw that in there so that it clarifies he's not having sexual thoughts about an infant.
Yeah.
But also, why are we even in a situation to have to clarify that? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's weird.
So Bella wakes up a vampire and finally gets to meet her daughter. Jacob is navigating pack life, and Edward is enjoying watching Bella become her own. After gifting Bella a cottage, the Cullens meet a challenge when Jacob takes matters into his own hands to expose the supernatural world to Charlie. After Bella and her family were out hunting, one of the Denali friends came across them. She believes she has seen an immortal child and reports them to the Volturi, sentencing them all to die.
Great job, Irina.
Bella is in transition, which she starts like hearing voices and hearing them talking about her, and she kind of is like fading in and out, obviously, which I know in the past with the other vampires talking about their transition, they said it was extremely painful and, you know, like a fire spreading, I think is how Bella describes it. So completely understandable that she was kind of fading in and out, because I'm sure the pain was almost unbearable at some points. But she does wake up, and she has kind of a moment where she backs into a corner and kind of gets a little defensive. But also, the entire Cullen family is standing there watching her wake up. So it would
Question.
catch me off guard.
I totally agree.
Jasper is becoming like super concerned with her newborn emotions, which obviously he's helped raise newborns, but she's able to kind of keep them in check, which is completely tripping Jasper out. And they decide to go hunting, but Bella consistently says pretty much throughout the entire third part of this book is that until somebody mentions her thirst, she's kind of able to push it down, which they're either determining it is because she's had so much knowledge of it, or it's possibly one of her superpowers that she gets with her transition, which as they go hunting, it's becoming blatantly evident that that could be the case whenever they come across a pack of humans rock climbing or something along that lines, hiking, and Bella starts chasing after them, and Edward follows behind her, and she kind of snaps herself out of it, snarls at Edward, and runs away. Which I kind of funny that Jake or Edward's just like flabbergasted at the fact that she's so good at being a vampire. I think they're all a little jealous, to be honest, of how easy it was. But I think Jasper extremely is jealous the fact that she's able to keep it all in check so well. But
let me ask you this. Do you have a theory on whether it's because she had knowledge, whether it's because it's a super skill of hers, or she had something else to focus on? Do you have a theory on like what it is that makes Bella different?
I do think it's because of the expectation that she had kind of set, but I also think she has just like her shield power, I guess I should say. I believe it's the will to protect people is kind of where that comes from, because she also can will herself to expose her thoughts to Edward at the very end. So my thought is she also has the will to be able to turn herself away because she doesn't want to kill a human. So I think it's kind of like almost like a necessity thing that we were kind of talking about with maybe Violet's signet in Fourth Wing. It's kind of like a similar thing with Bella, that I think that, you know, it's maybe a necessity of what she wants at the time or wills herself to want at the time, and in different ways. Or maybe it's another form of her shield of, you know, she's able to shield herself off from that thirst, or she's able to shield herself off from, you know, the thoughts of killing humans or that kind of thing as well.
Well, and so for me, I agree. I think it is related to her ability to be a shield. I kind of wish that would have been explained or said that's really what it was, instead of just like leaving it in the open. Partially because to me it doesn't make sense for it to be that she just has better self-control than others because she knows about vampires.
Yeah.
Jasper also, I mean, Jasper trained these newborns very closely. Like you would think somebody else would have had some level of similar control at least. And he said he'd never seen anything like it. So that one doesn't make sense to me. However, I do think also what could play into it, partially maybe with her shield, that, you know, her brain said it needed to be shielded because she has an infant that she needs to take care of. Mm-hmm. So, like, I don't know if that played into it, like that motherly instinct, you know, that overcomes everything, they say. So I just wonder, like, it wasn't ever really hinted that that was it. And I thought that was strange. But I will say, if it was her shield, I kind of wish it would have been more explored. Mm-hmm. I would have liked to know more about her shield and how we didn't realize that's what it was until the end. It just doesn't make sense to me, but whatever.
Agreed.
I will say, them going out and hunting, I could have skipped that scene. I didn't do that. Her going out and killing a jaguar or whatever it was. I don't care.
Mountain lion.
Yeah, I don't care. It's weird.
I think they only did that just because Edward kind of talks about, hey, let's take it slow. Let's get something easy. And then Bella kind of like goes for the hard thing, is able to take it down. And he's like, wow, that took a lot more skill. Like usually most vampires come, you know, not unscathed after trying to take down a mountain lion. So I think it was just kind of playing more into kind of the power she had
anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was weird.
But whenever they do return home, and Edward does determine that Bella is able to go and see Renesmee. And so Jacob comes out being protective, and he stops to make sure that she can handle the smell. So they test it out on him first, which I don't really understand how that would relate, considering she doesn't smell human or vampire, and Jacob smells obviously very much like a werewolf. So
Well,
kind
he
of didn't
smells
really.
bad. Like
Yeah,
he doesn't smell good to anybody that's a vampire.
yeah.
It didn't make any sense to me, but whatever.
So she does end up passing that test as well, and she goes in and meets Renesmee for the first time, which she does also say like she feels like she's missed quite a bit of time, even though it's been only a few days. But Renesmee's grown quite a way, and she ends up discovering what Renesmee's gift is, which basically when she touches somebody, she's able to share her thoughts and memories, and so she also, in the same kind of sense, Jacob kind of gets very protective and it's like, okay, time's up. Let's return her back, to Rose or whatever. And Bella is like, what's your problem? And he kind of doesn't really say anything, but then Bella's just like, it just makes sense. It clicks for her what has happened. And she freaks out on Jacob and like drags him out to the front yard. And they're all really impressed that she's able to keep her cool, even though she's very angry, until Jacob tells Bella that he has nicknamed her Nessie after the Loch Ness Monster. And I love that scene in the movie. It's one of my favorite scenes
Me
where
too.
she like freaks out on him.
Name my baby after a lake monster or whatever she says.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. I will say, I did feel bad that Seth got into the middle of it. But also, mind your business.
Well, I really like that in the background, Edward's kind of having a side conversation in the book, and he's like, she's fascinating, isn't she?
Yes,
Look
I
at her
love that.
go.
So cute.
It was such a cute little like moment of like he's just in awe of
Yeah.
how well she's handling everything. But Seth ended up getting in the middle of it, which she does feel really bad afterwards because she ends up finding out that her venom is deathly to werewolves and didn't know that prior. So she keeps apologizing, and Seth's like, it's no biggie. I get to chill out in the house for a few days, no problem. Like, I don't have to, he's so nonchalantly fine about it, the whole
He
thing.
is. Well, and in the book, she actually, I think, like breaks a rib or a shoulder and a collarbone or something. Like she breaks a couple things, not major, but she breaks enough that he has to heal for a couple days. In the movie, it doesn't show that. Like he gets back up. It doesn't look like he's injured, other than he just his pride, or whatever. But so that was interesting to see that in the book she actually injured him, which would make sense if she's that strong and doesn't know it.
True.
I will say, speaking of that, not strong and doesn't know it, one of my favorite scenes also is when she hugs Edward when she first gets up. And he's like, really, you're stronger than me. Which doesn't make a whole lot of sense because he doesn't actually have to breathe. So, like, holding extra tight wouldn't actually crush his lungs to impact his, you know what I mean? But whatever.
Well, I think she was like crushing, like crushing his, his ribs or something like that is what I just kind of imagined by that statement.
Yeah.
But then afterwards, Bella does kind of calm down and just kind of accepts that it happened and she can't do anything about it. So they try to spend as much time with her as possible, getting to see her growing and evolving and everything. And whenever they have a moment where the Cullens kind of go away to hunt, and turns out they were setting up the finishing touches of this cottage they had remodeled for them. So Bella and Edward kind of get their honeymoon as vampires in the cottage, which I do find it really sweet. They did set up one of the rooms to look like the feathered room at the Isle. They had plenty of bookshelves, and it seems like it was all perfectly Bella minus the closet, and matched everything that she would have wished for. So I do think that that was nice. However, I do find it weird that their intention is to move away when they start talking about that a whole bunch, for the fact, like, why would you remodel this cottage and spend all this time doing that if you're just planning on leaving shortly after she transitions? So that doesn't make any sense to me, but I mean, maybe for the future for them to come back, but however, most of their stuff's not going to probably be good then, because it's going to be dusty or damaged or something.
Well, and they kind of make it seem like they put a nursery in there for the baby too, which obviously if they're leaving and coming back, she wouldn't be a baby.
Yeah.
Actually, in a couple weeks, she's not a baby. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so I thought that was a little weird. It was also weird to me. I don't know. I guess I didn't really understand whether the cottage already existed or if they like literally built it for them.
So the way that it
Middle of
looked,
the
it
woods.
sounded like whenever Edward was talking about it, it was like a rundown building and they remodeled it to fit Bella's needs because they talk about how Emmett wanted to add on another floor and like a tower, stuff like that. So Jacob hears everybody talking about the possibility of moving away and he gets really kind of upset because he obviously doesn't want to leave his family. So he decides to take matters into his own hands and goes to Charlie and exposes what he is, which granted Charlie did respond a little bit better than expected. I would have imagined him probably grabbing a gun and shooting at him if it was really playing into what Charlie is, but he decides to tell Charlie to come visit Bella, that she's back, she's just different, and that they have adopted, I think they said Edward's niece, I think is how they were playing the off story. And so the Cullens have to quickly give Bella some human lessons about shifting and, moving around, blinking, which Bella had kind of noticed them prior whenever she was hanging out with Renesmee doing things like that out of habit.
Can I ask you this? She's only been a vampire for like maybe 3 days. Maybe a
Yeah.
week at this point. I don't know. She ain't forgot that she was a human a week ago and what humans do. And why are we acting like she's completely forgotten every single thing?
Well, I think the point is though that as a vampire, a lot of that stuff is not necessary. And like humans, I think, do some of those things out of just like habit, and where a vampire doesn't have to move. It doesn't have to like your legs don't go numb, if you're standing on, one foot too long, it doesn't, hurt. She doesn't need to breathe, so she doesn't remember to like move her shoulders to act like she's breathing. Things like that I think is just more so the subtle reminders that are not used to because now her body doesn't need all that.
Right, but a week ago. So, like, does she not remember being human? Is that what we're saying?
No, I think it's more so like she just doesn't remember the small little things that humans naturally do that vampires don't need to do.
Except her and Edward talked about part of it.
Yeah, but it was just like a crash course to remember it all.
No, I mean, like, when she was still human and Edward was a vampire, like, talked about, like, that he doesn't sleep, he doesn't eat, like, they talked about some of these things. I don't know. I feel like the blinking, that made sense to me, that she'd forget to blink because, like.
Well, the fidgeting, because as a vampire, I mean, they can just sit there for a long period of time not moving. So fidgeting, they talked about blinking, they talked about make sure you like look like you're breathing, and then they talked about, just kind of shifting on your feet if you're standing up and just like fidgety things. Because I mean, humans do fidgety things.
Yeah, no, and I'm not saying they don't. My thing is, I don't understand why Bella, like, all of a sudden forgot every single thing ever about being human.
No, I don't think she forgot about it. I think it was just like a crash course of, hey, just make sure you follow or you remember to do these things. Because she's also panicking at the same time, the fact that Jacob showed Charlie. And so, she hasn't had time to be able to not look like a vampire in front of a human, like practice wise.
Yeah. Well, and I think the book and the movie are a little bit different in that, like, Charlie doesn't stay all day long like he does in the book, too.
Mm-hmm.
So, but, I don't know. I just thought it was, I don't know.
Well, and so when Charlie does arrive, she decides to go ahead and sit down with Renesmee in her lap, and he has agreed that everything is kind of need to know, which I think was the best way for him to stay alive with Volturi, with werewolves, with everything. So
yeah, I would agree. It was opposite in the movie. In the movie, she told him, "I'll tell you what you need to know." In the book, he said, "I only want to know what I need to know."
yeah,
that was interesting.
Which he does kind of have some open ending questions that he kind of asks, and then like as soon as he asks them, he's like, "Never mind, I don't need to know that."
Yeah.
Which I guess is the safest way for him to stay involved. Which I think it implies that Jacob kind of said something along that lines, like, "Hey, if the less you know, the more likely Bella is to stay around. The more you know, the more she's going to have to leave." So I think he just realizes he's going to have to make that sacrifice.
Yeah.
But Bella handles it really well. She doesn't attempt to attack him. She does talk about how it was at first like kind of like piercing needles down her throat, but she did really well handling the situation. But Emmett is sitting in the corner, kind of joking around, making some kind of like sexual comments and stuff like that. And so after Charlie ends up leaving, Bella challenges Emmett to an arm wrestle match. And one of my favorite scenes out of probably all of the books. In the challenge, Emmett ends up losing and he becomes a big old baby about it.
He does.
However, the bet was he stops talking about, Edward and Bella's sex life if Bella wins. And so, of course, that's what happens.
That would make me so uncomfortable. And if I had to like beat you in an arm wrestle to get you to shut up, I'd put everything into it. Because please do not make sexual innuendos in front of my father.
Well, and she does pretty much little.
Is that the word?
I think so.
Okay.
But she ends up putting very little into it, it kind of seems like, and ends up winning. And so Emmett no longer can speak about that. And
he wants a rematch, though, he says, I think.
Yes, which I kind of wish we would have got one at the end, like somewhere like a rematch or something, because I think it would be a good ending to the book. But
yeah.
So as Bella, Renesmee, and Jacob are out hunting, they realize Irina is kind of in a distance looking at them, and she ends up running across, which Bella at first believes is because she's with a werewolf. And so the Cullens chase after her and she gets away, and they just kind of let it pass, continue letting the world revolve. They did try to reach out to the Alaska Coven and realize that she had not returned home, which I don't remember if it was a few days or like a week or so later, but it seemed like quite a bit of significant amount of time had passed before Alice ended up having the vision where Irina had gone to the Volturi and reported that she had seen an immoral child in the Cullens' possession. So then they were all sentenced to die.
Yeah, in the movie, it like, obviously because it's in a movie and you have to speed things up, it literally happens the exact same day.
Yes.
If not, I'm pretty sure it's the exact same day. If not, at least by the next day. But it's like less than 24 hours after it happened.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. You know that? Like, when you really think about it, they've been like a family, a pseudo family for all this time. And instead of even going back to her family in Alaska and saying, I saw this and I'm freaking out, or going to Carlisle and saying, what is going on? She goes straight to the Volturi, who she hates. How does that make any sense?
Yeah. It also didn't make any sense, especially after the long time loyalty. But I can understand which it seems like it's been a very long time since her mom was sentenced to die for an immoral child. However, I get that their life seems like it's very long but very short at the same time. So I can understand where she's maybe still processing those feelings and kind of reacts badly to it. But I still think.
But you go to the people that killed your mom?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I was like, I still feel like I would run back to my coven and be like, hey, you all need to get on board with the fact that they've done this. It's bad. Like, what should we do about it kind of situation. So it doesn't really make sense there.
I agree.
The Volturi standoff is coming, and the Cullens gather witnesses to speak on Renesmee. As the Volturi arrive, they realize that As the Volturi arrive, the Cullens realize that they have come up with any plan to try to kill the Cullens or try to make anything fit. While they are pondering death, the guards started their attack, but are surprised to be met with a resistance. After Alice returns with an unexpected friend, the Volturi determine they have no cause and leave. Everyone rejoices and they're happily ever after.
Ooh.
So, Alice and Jasper, which the Cullens believe, take off in the middle of the night and cross over the Pax land, and they leave a note basically implying, don't come looking for me. This is best for us. We've got to go. So the Cullens believe that Alice and Jasper have left them, which they kind of talk about how, Alice and Jasper were created by somebody else, so maybe their bond wasn't as thick with the Cullens as the rest of them, which I still believe that they're insulting. Yeah. And honestly, after how long they've spent with him, they should have known better. However, I don't think her behavior reflected anything positive either. She was very secretive in the middle of the night, like, so sorry, here's a letter to say goodbye. And then I also wonder if she never found that kid and his aunt, what would have happened either. But
I'm kind of surprised that Bella was smart enough to realize the page came out of her book, to be honest.
true. I wouldn't have probably noticed it.
I wouldn't have turned it over and looked at it, I don't think.
No. And which, I mean, that clue does lead her to an address. And so she decides to try to follow up on it later. And as they're kind of spending some time with Charlie and stuff, the Cullens are traveling around to find different witnesses to bring back to the Cullens house to witness Renesmee being immortal. And the witnesses kind of start trickling in. I believe the first ones are the Denali clan, which is, of course, their close friends, which they do have a kind of a bad reaction at first. But after Renesmee shows their lights, or shows her visions or whatever, they end up agreeing to stand as witness. So then the next ones are...
I will say I liked that like the pseudo mom in that group, I can't remember her name, but that
Carmen?
Yes, Carmen. That she kind of called the others out and was like, wait, listen before you judge. We just said we were going to do that. And
Yeah.
here you are freaking out. Take a deep breath. Like, the worst case scenario, you go and turn them in right after that. I mean, like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I don't know.
So there's Tanya, Kate, Carmen, and Eleazar,
yeah. Eleazar.
And so those are the four that remain within the Denali pack. And Kate has the power of like electric shock.
So badass. I love her.
And then Eleazar has where he can detect what other people's powers are. And I believe he
remember
used
that.
to be, and I believe he used to be with the Volturi, wasn't it? Him that was him?
Yeah, and I did not remember either of those things about him. And in the movie, it just says, like, when they're practicing outside, it says, you didn't tell me she was a shield or whatever. Eleazar says that. But it doesn't tell us that he has the capabilities, I don't think, to detect skills or anything.
Yes. So the next ones to arrive are Peter and Charlotte, which are Jasper's friends that he grew up with.
He served with Peter in Maria's army.
Which neither one of those have any kind of special powers. Then
from there, I think
the Irish clan was the next ones that arrived.
Yes.
And the Irish clan has Maggie, Sabian, and Liam. Isn't she the one that can like spread her visions, like blackness, or she can make people see whatever they want to see?
Sabrina.
No, that's the Frina. What was Sabian's gift?
So she's the one that Carlisle essentially says, like, if she wills it, it'll be done. And she says that's not true. And then Maggie is the other one in their clan, but I can't remember what her gift is.
Hers is she knows when she's being lied to or not, because they said that whenever they told her, she said it was the truth and they didn't need to see the visions. And the next one that arrives is the Egyptian clan, which includes Amon, Kebi, I believe is how it's pronounced, Benjamin, and Tia, which Benjamin is the only one that's skilled out of that group, and he is like an earthbender.
The elements. Yeah.
Yes.
I love Benjamin in the book, in the movie. Such a great character, and I kind of wish we'd have gotten more of him, honestly. And they casted him perfectly too, I think, with that.
Yes. So, fun fact, I have a Bella and a Benjamin because of Twilight.
Oh, I didn't know you named him Benjamin because of Twilight.
Yeah, because Benjamin was my favorite, one of the other clans.
And then you have a Bailey. Where'd you get Bailey?
It was the only other B name that looked like her, because the other two were B names.
Okay, that's fair.
I didn't want to leave her out. Mom wanted me to name her something else, which she was a Gwen when I adopted her, and she didn't look like a Gwen.
She doesn't look like a Gwen.
Amon is really kind of the leader of the group, and he doesn't want them to fight, especially because he didn't want Benjamin to be exposed to the Volturi because he had been keeping him secret. And so he kind of gets a little bit angry that Benjamin does want to stay and stand up as witness. The next one to show up is the nomad Garrett. And Garrett ends up sort of kind of falling in love with Kate. He just finds her and her powers completely fascinating. And it was like a quick match, I think, for sure.
It was
and
super
then
cute. I love them.
It was. And then the nomads, Mary and Randall, also show up, which we don't really know too much about them. It just doesn't really emphasize too much there. Then the next group was the Amazons, which include Kachiri, Senna, and Zephrina. And Zephrina is able to like spread her visions to others, make them see whatever she wants them to see, kind of.
Which super cool talent. And Kachiri doesn't show up until the end with Alice and Jasper.
Yes. Which they talk about how, like, I guess, I don't know, maybe she knew of that group, and so she was just able to kind of lead them to that. But I also don't see how Zephrina, and if one of their coven knew of this immortal child, that the rest of her coven didn't also know of that. I feel like that would be a significant thing to kind of speak about within your group that you're living with. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think they knew. I think that the idea was that Zephrina would be such an asset in a battle that those two went ahead and left the third one behind to do that job in case they didn't make it in time.
But I feel like they would have thought about it, while they're there too, though, if they knew that was what was going to happen, because Edward would be able to pull that thought from their brain if that was the case.
Well, I think the goal was always to not have to fight, but in the case of a fight, Zephrina would be,
yeah.
You really want to go, we'll just blind, they talk about she's sort of like Alec, except Alec can do all of I don't actually think he can do all of the senses. I think 3 senses are named: sight, hearing, and touch, maybe. But Edward names 3 senses that he can do. Sight and hearing, obviously, pretty much all you need to be taken away anyways during a battle, and Zephrina sight. But, the benefit in battle to have that is insane,
Yeah. Well, and as Bella and Edward are training, Edward decides that he just can't bear to have himself watch Bella be trained. So in that middle of all of that, they end up getting the unexpected visitors of the Romanian coven, which is Stefan and Vladimir, which they don't care what they've done. They're just like, I'm here to fight the Volturi. That's all I care about. Which of course they were not even asked to be there. They just heard and so they are just kind of there to witness. Oh, and we also get Alistair at some point as well.
Yeah,
Alistair is just like the attic guy that just hangs out in the attic.
I remember him.
So they begin training, and Bella is trying to prevent, she's trying to spread her shield to prevent Edward from getting shocked. And weirdly enough, Kate doesn't believe that that's a big enough kind of motive to distract Bella or get Bella to project her shield. So she does ask for Renesmee to come over, which Bella kind of has a pretty negative reaction. And Edward's like, hey, she's still a newborn. Let's kind of maybe chill it out a little bit. So they end up getting where Bella is able to project her shield a little bit more. It's obviously not as much as in the final battle, but she's able to kind of project it out. And Garrett ends up getting a little bit fascinated with Kate and says, hey, I hear that you can lay out a man flat on his back. And Kate's like, you want to give it a try? Which in the movie, it just kind of looks like she holds up her hand and then he just like touches it with one finger and he just like falls over.
Super cute. Flirty, like just a little. I will say, I did like in the book, we get more of a detailed scene when she threatens to use the child instead of Edward. And I liked that a little bit more because it made more sense once we got sort of to the end result, as opposed to in the movie, it's like just one little scene that she can cover one person and then, and it's just with Kate's gift, and then we move on and we don't talk about it till the very end. I thought it was interesting though, because it talks about how her shield only works for mental gifts. I understand to an extent that like our our body has a sort of electrical current with the nerve endings and how it works, all that sort of thing. And so I could see sort of how you could say maybe it's a mental gift that Kate has, but really it's a physical gift at the base of it. So it works for physical and mental. Like, it doesn't make, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Because they say it's only mental, but it works for Kate's gift.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. But I did really like that scene. And then even Zafrina jumps in and it says, you know, like, everyone raise your hand as she shields you and you get your sight back or whatever. I thought that was really cool to see. It actually like shows us like her practicing it on a greater scale to make it make sense at the end, as opposed to how the movie does it.
I do think that was one of the scenes that and then the standoff with the Volturi did a really good description of like visualizing how that scene was going down. I don't think her previous books it was as good with some of those scenes, but this one really created like almost like you've seen like a force field almost going around them, and kind of you were able to visualize it a little bit better than some of the other scenes that she had, you know, talked about as well.
I agree.
So Bella also sneaks away during a visit to Charlie, which of course she's going to Charlie instead of Charlie coming to her because there's a house full of human drinking vampires. So she sneaks away.
Human drinking vampires is hilarious.
And so she sneaks away and she ends up meeting up with the J. Jenkins, which is the guy that Alice had left a note in her book to meet up with. She doesn't quite know why she's there until she gets there and he starts talking about, you know, what kind of documents are you needing? She realizes that Alice has kind of given her an out for Renesmee. However, she realizes that it's more than likely just going to be Renesmee and Jacob that's going to be able to get away. And so she orders documents for them.
Which in the movie and in the book is different. In the book, Alice gives her the contact to get those papers made. And she chooses just Jacob and Renesmee. But in the movie, Edward and Jasper place the order before they've left for just Jacob and Renesmee. And Bella's confused, thinking there should be more. So I thought that was interesting, like, just to switch that up the way that it was, you know, and how it might have impacted the story, just a little thing like that.
I do think that Alice and Jasper creating those on the front end would have made more sense rather than kind of the drawn out rush paperwork of getting it all done kind of scene. So I do think it was a little bit better explained in the movie for sure.
Well, especially because the guard dog at the warehouse said he makes papers.
Yeah.
And so that's how she was tripped off. That's what she was supposed to be asking for. I feel like if I was just sending you on a thing, I would put something in the note also that suggests what you should be doing while you're, you know what I mean? Like, it just felt kind of sloppy, to be honest with you. I felt like she had to fix that in an editing session or something instead of in the front. But I like that he was an attorney. I like that about No Jinx. Also, I liked that he was so scared of Jasper.
Yes.
I kind of wanted more of that.
Jacob is obviously there with Renesmee at Charlie's house, and to kind of cover up that she left, she buys a cute little like Christmas present for Renesmee, which is basically a little locket, and they end up going to like having Christmas at Charlie's house. And Bella ends up getting away again before the final like standoff and picks up all the documents, which of course Mr. Jenkins is kind of like, you know, are you trying to kidnap her from her father? You know, I'm kind of concerned. And she just pretty much says, hey, like, it's none of your business. I'm not doing that, but it's none of your business, even if it was. And they end up going and hiding out in the same field where they had the battle with the newborns, and they wait out for the Volturi to arrive. So once they do, the Volturi come, and they have brought everybody, which all of the vampires are just shocked by that because apparently the wives never leave the towers. Apparently, like, they usually don't bring their entire guards. Arrow and them apparently don't come out very often. So they're just kind of shocked by the fact that everybody is there. Edward also is kind of reading the thoughts of all of them, realizing that they're kind of bound and determined to find some reason to take care of the Cullen clan that day. However, Arrow requests to see Edward's thoughts about the incident with Bella giving birth basically to Renesmee. And Arrow ends up fascinated and, asks to meet Renesmee and assures his brothers that this is true, like what they're all saying is true. So he asks to meet Renesmee, which Arrow in the movie is just like so giddy about anything that's just like exciting and new to him, which, I mean, after you've been alive that long of time and something new happens, I can understand, but he gets like really giddy, and I straight out remember the scene where he's like, ooh,
his little tinkling laugh will forever be engraved in my brain.
Yes. And so he goes and he sees the vision that Renesmee shows him, and he realizes like she's just gifted, and he's excited and everything. However, they then start trying to come up with a reasoning of, they've sided with the children of the moon. Well, Edward clarifies that they're not children of the moon, obviously, because it's daylight, and that they're a different.
Where'd that come from?
Yeah, whole different ballgame. And they didn't even really go on it any further after that anyways, which I think is pretty cool, though, that they do emphasize that Jacob could shift into anything he wanted to. It's just they chose to do werewolves. So I would think that they would kind of be interesting to see, like, maybe at the end of the scene if they had done like where he shifted into like a bird or something else, and he was able to kind of evolve his gifts as well.
I agree.
Especially if you're going to touch on it so late in the book. Like, I feel like there should have been more to it, because it seemed like it was a pretty impactful moment. But then after they decide,
I think it hints that his ancestors could have chosen any other form, but a wolf is what was chosen. Not necessarily Jacob, but I agree that I would have liked to see, like, even just him, like, trying to shift into something else, like, hinting at it to follow up.
Yeah.
Because really, when the book ended, we kind of all, well, I'll say the book ended, but when we watched the last movie, we all still kind of had the thought, like, it was open-ended enough that we could come back and have another one.
Yeah. Which the book kind of does that as well, though, too.
Yeah. True.
And so, I mean, again, the Volturi is pretty dead set on getting rid of them. So then they start going on to the risk of Renesmee at growth, which I know we both want to talk about the fact that the movie is forever engraved in the moment whenever they start having like this battle. And we all did not know it was the vision. I just remember I had gone to the midnight premiere and I was with my mother and I was like, that's not how the book was. That's not how the book was. And people were just like yelling at the screen. It was probably the most lively. And I've gone to Marvel movie like opening nights, and usually those are kind of animated. And this one was probably the most animated theater I've ever been in. And so it was just like super thrown off to everybody. And I will probably never forget that moment for sure.
I wholeheartedly agree. I will never forget that moment. I still can remember like sobbing in the movie theater and like looking at my people and be like, that's not what the book did. However, like I said before, like I rewatch these like yearly. The effect never dies down. I just watched it this week in preparation to do this episode, and I literally was pacing my living room because my anxiety was at a 10 watching this battle scene. I know it's not real, and I still hate it. Like when Aro rips off Carlisle's head, or when they kill Jasper, like all these different things, like I was panicking just watching it happen, even though I know it's still fake. Like, so it's just insane. I mean, the shock effect, great. Whoever came up with that idea, you deserve like a bonus or something, because that was amazing.
Well, and all the other books to film adaptations had been pretty like consistent with following pretty much closely to the book. So it did really add something else to it that like made it so different than the book. But honestly, I think it made it so much better. Like, because we didn't get some kind of epic battle or like some epic thing happening.
You love an epic battle.
Yes, like something needs to happen with some action, and like Bella attacking or trying to attack Jacob and just crushing Seth's shoulder is not good enough for me. Like, I need something. And even like the description of the scene in the book of just like where the guards started to attack really wasn't that like epic. Like everybody's just standing there staring while Bella's having like this secret fight with, Jane and Alec. So it really wasn't something crazy.
I agree.
So I honestly, I prefer the movie ending scene wholeheartedly over the book for sure.
Oh, me too. And I don't normally say that. I normally prefer the book over the movie, but in this scenario, I think I prefer over the book. I mean, that's just insane. Whoever thought of that, said you
Yeah.
did good. You need to pat yourself on the back, buddy, because I still to this day, and I know it's fake, and I still to this day have such anxiety over that scene, and I love it. Like, we make fun in the moment because I'm pacing, but like, and it's like, I feel like we get a sort of sense of, I don't want to say justice, but kind of like Jane and Alec, like we kind of see them get what they really deserve, even though it doesn't end up being real. It still feels good, like it still feels cathartic, whatever. And watching Jane turn tail and run, I love that.
So the guards, as they're kind of debating back and forth whether or not to kill the Cullens, the guard starts attacking, which apparently that's kind of routine for them. While they're debating, they basically just take off their senses, so when they determine it, they can't run away. However, yeah, they're met with Bella's force field.
At least
and
she's
so,
good at something finally. I'm sorry to say that, but jeez.
And so Alec and Jane and I think it's Chelsea, I think is the other one, starts like attacking with their powers, and they're met with the force field. And it's kind of funny because like Edward's like, yes, Bella. Like, it's just like, okay, well, what did you expect from her?
There were some gifts in the Volturi or in the Guard or whatever that we didn't see in the movie. And I had forgotten that those existed too. So like Chelsea was like, you can break apart bonds between people and stuff, like lesser bonds. And then you have Aros has his own shield and all these different things or whatever. And I didn't remember any of that.
Yeah. So as they're all doing this, Edward kind of makes a grand like stand, because he hears Alice. And so Alice waltzes in with, was it Kashini? Kashini?
You mean the other Amazon?
Yeah, Katrini.
Cheery, I think.
Cheery.
I don't know.
We're horrible with names.
Dude, what is the half breed's name? Oh, Nahul.
Sure. We'll go with
Nahuel.
We'll go with your pronunciation.
I don't know if that's right. But what's his aunt's name?
Julian? It's Huilen.
I don't know. Why are they not in the back?
I don't know. I guess because they were a surprise.
But it's the Vampire Index for a reason.
So whenever they arrive, they kind of start telling the story about how he came to be. And he talks about how his dad had impregnated his mom, and his mom had kind of crawled off to the forest to have him. He ended up biting his aunts and trying to save him as his mom had passed. And apparently his dad is now going around changing or getting humans pregnant. His name's Joe Ham, and
collecting the kids.
Yeah.
You know what that sounds like? Peter Quill in Guardians of the Galaxy in Ego.
Yeah. So they end up discovering that he is actually full grown, and that he's over 100 years old, and that he's no harm to humans, obviously, because they've never heard about him. And so they finally end up determining that no laws have been broken. And so they tuck their tail between their legs and run away. And so everybody ends up celebrating, and everybody starts like slowly trickling away. However, the immortal boy and his aunt stay for a little bit so they can learn a little bit more about his life and everything. Which Bella does make the comment, like he's kind of weird and he's like staring at her, and she just thinks that he's staring at Renesmee. And Edward ends up making the comment like, no, he's staring at you because he realizes that I, as loving you, have saved you, where his dad could have done the same thing. And he says that he'd blamed himself, for killing his mother all this time, and he finally was able to forgive himself for that. So I thought that was
really sweet. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say, though, then Edward says something along the lines of Jacob's going to have competition.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm surprised Jacob hasn't thought in 6 years instead of 16. Why are you thinking that, Dad?
Uh-huh.
It's weird.
Yep. It is. It's very
Oh,
cringe. Which I have to say the ending scene is kind of cringe too, where they just like have like a vision of like Renesmee and Jacob holding hands on a beach and
the
they like
vision,
walk
too.
with them.
What we talk about, Alice shouldn't be able to see them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm telling you, I'll still watch these movies every single year, and I'll still complain, but I'm going to keep watching them. I ain't reading the books ever again, but I'll keep watching them.
Well, and I did forget to also touch on the moment where Bella is kind of turning to Jacob, Renesmee, and Edward to say goodbye. I still tear up at like her speech about like, you know, to Renesmee and Jacob, like, you always be my best man, like, you know, take care of her, all that stuff. Oh, I tear up every time. I forgot to touch on that earlier. They end up living happily ever after. However, they did make a comment at the end, like the Vulture would find some reason someday to come after them again and they would be ready. So like, I feel like there should be another book. She should have wrote another book and not Midnight Sun.
Actually, don't even write the book. Let some screenwriter write the next
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah.
Keep it a movie.
Yeah.
No offense, but don't.
Yeah, after reading Midnight Sun, that's
part
probably
of it,
like,
but she can co-write it. But somebody else needs to double check it.
so what is your final thoughts and rating?
So I'm going to start prefacing my rating by reminding everyone that I don't really rate books. Obviously, for the purpose of the podcast, it's kind of helpful to rate them so that everybody knows. More of a complainer, and I'll just tell you whether or not I liked it or didn't like it, whether I suggest you read it or not. So my numbers are probably awful and probably shouldn't mean a thing to anybody. But for this purpose, and again, and I create the number literally right here on the spot every single episode. So that also probably shouldn't hold any weight. But anyways, I actually would probably give this book, I'm going to say a 4.6. I enjoyed this book much more than any of the other 3 or 4, I guess technically. I did technically read the 4th one, so I can't really say that. But I enjoyed Breaking Dawn. I actually enjoyed it, I should say. Like, I won't read it again probably just because I'd have to read the first 3 to get to this one. But I enjoyed this book. There were parts that I thought were unnecessary or should have been better explained. As I've said throughout this episode, I will never like the fact that he imprints on a baby. I kind of wish it could have been done a little bit differently. I don't have an idea or suggestion as to how it could have been done, but I do think it could have been done differently. I will say, though, that I really liked getting to see the other vampires, getting to see these other skills and that sort of thing at the end, the big, that big scene. Again, I agree with Emily that an actual fight scene in the book would have been really cool. I like the way the movie's done. The shock effect, like I said, still affects me to this day. So, yeah, that's my rating. What's yours?
So I rank my system starting at a 3 and kind of go up and down from there. So with that being said, it to me was higher than the other ones. I would say it's more like a 4.3, maybe 4.4. If we're talking about the movie though, I would rank it up there like 4.6, 4.7. But with the book, it was better than the other ones. It just wasn't something epic, but I do think it was better written. I do think it was better descriptions of like the different scenes. It was really more easier to kind of visualize outside of the movie. And so I think it was really much better overall. However, again, there wasn't a fight scene. There was a lot of just kind of rambling and unnecessary information as well in there. So it kind of, the unnecessary information and stuff kind of ranked it a lot lower. Plus, the kind of the imprinting thing does bother me. It doesn't, I don't think bother me as much as it bothers you, just because that's, I grew up reading that and it just didn't ever occur to me then. So I just kind of pass it off now. But I do think that now day and age, that's a huge problem. But I do think that it was much better than the other ones. I would say probably 4.3, 4.4, but It was better for sure. It redeemed itself. I know me and Carly were talking about it, which I don't know if we talked about the last one, but I do think that if I would started reading this series today, I don't think I would have made it past Twilight and read anymore to get to Breaking Dawn to actually enjoy it, which is sad because I do think it's like a huge nostalgic thing in my childhood that I remember. But I do think that overall it was much better than what I remembered it being, especially after the disappointment from the last three. I definitely think it redeemed itself with this one for sure.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, so as always, if you liked this episode or any of our other episodes, please subscribe to get access to bloopers, extra content, and more on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Patreon, YouTube, and just about any other platform that you can listen to podcasts on.
You can also send us book suggestions, comments, or general inquiries to our email at likewereadthem at Karl with a K, impodcast.com. Our new release schedule also will be bi-weekly on Fridays. We will also be including some random bonus content in between. This bonus content will be subscription based, so we may include things like arcs, games, theories, some additional books, Marvel movies, reviews, and more. But we also hope to bring you more content on our Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok with this new schedule as well. So you will also know the first books instead of us releasing it on Facebook beforehand. So we are moving our schedule to release the next book 2 weeks in advance. So it's not like you're going to have a huge gap. But after that, you guys will have first released for anybody who listens to the end of our episodes. And then everybody else will get the exposure on Facebook on the following Sunday after the episode releases. So definitely tune into the end of our episodes to find out what we're reading next, because you guys will get a couple days head start.
Yeah, so we appreciate you tuning into this episode, and we can't wait to hear your thoughts on this episode. The next episode, which will be the start of season 2, it will be The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez, and it comes out on September 6th. Like Emily said in that episode, you'll find out what our next book is, and then the following Sunday is when the post actually released. You'll get a little bit of a head start if you do it that way. But I'm going to read the excerpt from the back. Kristen Peterson doesn't do drama, will fight to the death for her friends, and has no room in her life for guys who just don't get her. She's also keeping a big secret, facing a medically necessary procedure that will make it impossible for her to have children. Planning her best friend's wedding is bittersweet for Kristen, especially when she meets the best man, Josh Copeland. He's funny, sexy, never offended by her mile-wide streak of sarcasm, and always one chicken enchilada ahead of her hangry. Even her dog, Stuntman Mike, adores him. The only catch? Josh wants a big family someday. Kristen knows he'd be better off with someone else, but as their attraction grows, it's harder and harder to keep him at arm's length. The Friend Zone will have you laughing the moment and grabbing your tissues the next as it tackles the realities of infertility and loss with wit, heart, and a lot of sass. So, tune in next week, and as always, we promise to Karl them like we read them.
Oh, theme song.